The city sky was not simply dark that evening. It was a deep, bruised purple, heavy with a rain that had threatened to fall all day. Inside a sleek black car that cost more than most houses, Charles navigated the shimmering streets. He was returning from a dinner that was not really a dinner at all, but a performance. For Charles, life had become a series of performances, shaking hands, making small talk, his smile a carefully crafted tool. He was a millionaire many times over, a man who built skyscrapers and bought islands with the stroke of a pen, but in that quiet, leather-scented interior, he felt a hollow emptiness. The lights of the city blurred past his window, not as points of wonder, but as a stream of obligations he had to fulfill. He loosened the tie around his neck, a strip of expensive silk that often felt like a noose. The first drop of rain hit the windshield with a definitive splat. Then another and another, until the sky could no longer hold back its deluge. Within seconds, it was not raining, but pouring, a deafening drumming on the car's roof that turned the world outside into a watery, distorted painting. Charles leaned forward, squinting to see through the frantic swish of the wipers. He was on a quieter tree-lined street now, a shortcut he often took to escape the main thoroughfares.
And that is when it happened.
A low, shuddering thump, thump, thump began to resonate through the car, a jarring rhythm that fought against the symphony of the rain. A flat tire perfect, just the ending such a day deserved. With a sigh that came from thievery depths of his soul, Charles guided the wounded vehicle to the curb. Stepping out into the storm was like being plunged into a cold bath. The rain was icy and relentless, instantly soaking his tailored suit jacket, plastering his usually perfect hair to his forehead. The water seeped through the fine fabric of his trousers and into his expensive leather shoes. He was miserable. He popped the trunk, the metal latch cold against his fingers, and stared at the pristine, complicated tire kit as if it were a puzzle from another planet. He could call someone. He had a phone in his pocket that could connect him to a service that would send a team of people to handle this. But a stubborn pride, or perhaps just sheer frustration, made him decide to do it himself. He wrestled the heavy jack in the unwieldy spare tire onto the glistening wet pavement, his hands already getting slick with rain and grime. Across the street, nestled between a quiet bookstore and a cozy-looking cafe, was a small flower shop. Its windows were still lit, a warm golden glow against the oppressive grey of the storm. The sign above the door, painted in curling letters, read, "The Petal Place." Inside, a young woman named and was finishing her closing duties. She hummed a soft tune to herself as she swept up stray leaves and petals from the tiled floor. The air in the shop was thick with the earthy, sweet perfume of roses, lees, and damp soil. She loved this time of day, the quiet peace after a long day of creating beautiful arrangements for other people's special moments. She was about to turn off the main lights when the sight across the street caught her eye. A man, clearly wealthy based on the car, was engaged in a losing battle with a tire in the elements. He looked comically out of place, like a prince who had been thrown into a mud puddle. She saw him drop a wrench and let out a frustrated groan she could almost hear through the glass. Most people in her neighborhood would have just looked away, minding their own business, but had a different nature. Her heart was as soft as the pedal she handled daily. Seeing someone in trouble, even a rich stranger, stirred a need in her to help. She didn't stop to think about it. She walked to the back, filled the thermos with the hot peppermint tea she had been drinking, grabbed her large, bright yellow umbrella, and headed out into the downpour. Charles was on the verge of admitting defeat, his knuckles scraped and his suit ruined, when the drumming of the rain on his back suddenly stopped. It was replaced by the gentle patter of water on top nylon. He looked up, blinking rainwater from his eyes. Standing over him was a woman holding a large yellow umbrella like a shield against the storm. She was wearing a simple, cozy L-looking sweater, With a few water droplets clinging to the woolen, her face free of makeup was kind and open.
"Hey," she said, her voice warm and clear, cutting through the noise of the storm.
"You look like you could use this." She held out the thermos. Charles was so taken aback he couldn't speak for a moment. People didn't approach him like this. They made appointments. They sent emails. They were introduced by mutual associates. They didn't just walk out of the rain with hot tea and a dry smile. He slowly reached out and took the thermos, his cold fingers brushing against her warm ones.
"Thank you," he managed, his voice rough.
"Don't mention it," she said, shifting the umbrella to better cover them both. "It's peppermint. Good for warming you up from the inside out." She watched him struggle with the lug nuts for a moment. "You know, if you use your foot for leverage on the wrench, it might work better. The tire isn't going to mind a little shoe print." Charles almost laughed. She was giving him mechanical advice. He, who presided over boardrooms, was being instructed on how to change a tire by a flower shop girl. And the strangest part was he found himself actually following her suggestion. He braced his foot on the wrench and pushed, and with a loud, reluctant creak, the stubborn lug nut finally broke loose.
"It worked," he said, genuinely surprised.
"See," she said, a playful smile touching her lips. "Sometimes you just need a different perspective." They fell into an easy rhythm. After that, he worked on the tire and she stood there, a steady, calm presence in the storm, holding the umbrella over them both. They talked not about his work or his money, but about silly, simple things. She told him a funny story about a customer who wanted a bouquet made entirely of purple flowers, any kind, because it was her cat's favorite color. He found himself laughing, a real genuine laugh that felt foreign on his tongue. He told her about the dreadfully boring dinner he had just escaped from, and she made a face of such perfect, understanding sympathy that he felt truly seen. He learned her name was Anne and that the little shop was hers. She had built it from nothing. She didn't ask him what he did for a living or what his car cost. She just talked to him. The man covered in mud and frustration. In the warm glow of the street lamp, reflected 1,000 times in the raindrops, Charles felt the hollow feeling inside him begin to shrink, replaced by a strange new warmth that had nothing to do with the tea. He realized with a jolt that he did not want this moment to end. He did not want to get in his car and drive back to Hisseland's perfect apartment. He wanted to stay right here on this wet curb, talking to this woman with the kind eyes and the yellow umbrella. Finally, the spare tire was on. A little donut of a thing that looked ridiculous on his powerful car. The rain was beginning to slow its frantic pace, softening into a gentle drizzle. The performance was over. The task was done and smiled. "Well, you're all set."
"Try to stay dry."
She began to turn back towards her shop.
"And wait," Charles said, the words coming out before he could stop them.
She turned back, her expression curious. He took a step toward her, suddenly feeling nervous, like a boy asking a girl to a school dance. "This might sound forward, but could I see you again? Maybe I could buy you a coffee to thank you for the tea and the umbrella and the tire lesson," and looked at him, at his rain-soaked hair and his hopeful, earnest eyes. She saw the real man beneath the expensive, ruined suit. She smiled, a slow, beautiful smile that reached her eyes and made them crinkle at the corners.
"I'd like that," she said softly.
And as she walked back across the street, turning once to give a little wave, before disappearing into the golden light of her flower shop, Charles felt something he hadn't felt in years. Something so simple and profound it almost stole his breath. He felt happy, truly deeply happy. The days that followed the rainy night encounter unfolded for Charles like the turning of pages in a book he had not known he was desperate to read. His life, once a meticulously scheduled tapestry of meetings, acquisitions, and formal engagements, now possessed a new and vibrant thread, one colored with the anticipation of a simple coffee date. He found himself thinking of, and at the most inopportune moments, during a tense negotiation over a multi-million-dollar property, his mind would drift to the image of her holding that yellow umbrella, her smile a beacon in the gloom. The hollow feeling that had been his constant companion began to feel less like an emptiness and more like a space being patiently prepared for something new, something wonderful. Their first official meeting was at a small, unassuming cafe tucked away on a side street, a place Anne had suggested because, as she put it, they make the best hot chocolate and don't mind if you sit for hours. Charles arrived early, choosing a table in a quiet corner, feeling an unfamiliar nervousness. When Anne walked in, the air around him seemed to change. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes, but in a simple, comfortable dress the color of a summer sky, and she brought with her the faint, fresh scent of flowers. Their conversation was not a performance. It was easy, flowing from one topic to another without agenda or pretense. She asked him about his favorite childhood memory, and he found himself telling her about building a rickety treehouse with his father, a story he hadn't thought of in decades. He asked her about her dreams for the flower shop, and she spoke with a passion that was palpable, her hands moving as she described her hope to one day host community workshops. He was captivated. This was not the world of business. This was the business of the heart, and he was a willing student. Eager to share his world, Charles began planning elaborate dates. He took her to a restaurant so exclusive it had no sign on the door, where the menus were not printed but recited by a somber waiter. The food was art, tiny, beautiful constructions on vast white plates, and was polite, appreciative. But Charles noticed the slight hesitation in her eyes. The way her smile was more reserved. Later, as they walked through a hushed art gallery filled with intimidatingly modern sculptures, she stopped before one particular twisted piece of metal and whispered to him,
"It looks like my umbrella after that storm," he geeky.
Looked at the artist's statement, which spoke of deconstructing the paradigm of societal pressure, and then back at Anne's earnest, slightly mischievous face, and a genuine booming laugh escaped him, echoing in the quiet hall. He was trying to impress her with his world, but her world was the one that was beginning to impress itself upon him and decided it was her turn. The following Saturday, she presented him with a plan for a day that involved, as she mysteriously declared, no suits allowed. She met him wearing jeans and a worn-in leather jacket, her hair in a simple ponytail. Their first stop was a sprawling, bustling park. She spread out a checkered blanket on the grass, a little damp from the morning dew, and produced a picnic basket. Inside were not delicate canopies but thick, crusty sandwiches, a bag of salty potato chips, and a container of juicy red strawberries. Charles, who had never eaten anything messier than a carefully prepared steak in public, found himself biting into a sandwich that dripped with sauce, laughing as a chip crunched loudly. They fed leftover bread crust to a brave, hopeful squirrel, and Anne pointed out the shapes of the clouds. He felt the sun on his face, the soft grass beneath him, and a sense of uncomplicated joy that was more intoxicating than any fine wine. Later, she took him to a bustling street fair, a riot of color and noise. They walked through crowds of laughing people, the air thick with the smells of sizzling meat, sweet candied apples and diesel fumes, and won a small, garishly pink stuffed bear at a ring-toss game, and presented it to him with a triumphant grin. He in turn tried to win her a larger one at the basketball hoop, failing spectacularly to her great amusement. They shared a hot dog loaded with toppings, and it was Charles decided the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. He wasn't Charles the millionaire here. He was just Charles, the man holding a pink bear and a half-eaten hot dog, his hand firmly clasped in hands. He was learning to live in a world measured not in dollars and cents, but in shared laughter and simple, perfect moments as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. They found themselves back at the entrance to the park, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance. The cacophony of the fair was behind them, replaced by the gentle evening sounds of birds settling in for the night. They stood in a comfortable silence, the pink bear tucked under Charles's arm. He looked at Anne, her face illuminated by the soft, fading light, and he felt a surge of emotion so powerful it threatened to overwhelm him. It was more than gratitude, more than attraction. It was a profound sense of having found a place where he truly belonged. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. Her skin was warm. She looked up at him, her eyes soft and questioning, and in their depths he saw his own feelings reflected back at him. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she didn't. She met him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was not passionate or demanding, but gentle and sweet, a silent promise of something new beginning. It was a kiss full of the warmth of the sun, the sweetness of strawberries, and the simple, honest joy of a day spent in perfect company. When they finally parted, resting their foreheads together, Charles knew with a certainty that settled deep in his soul that his life had irrevocably changed. The world of first was only the beginning. The gentle kiss at the park's edge was not an ending, but a key turning a lock, opening a door to a new, more intimate dimension of their relationship. In the weeks that followed, a subtle but profound shift occurred between Charles and Anne. The easy camaraderie of their picnics and street fairs remained, but it was now layered with a new potent awareness of each other. A casual brush of hands while walking sent a jolt of electricity up Charles's arm. A sustained gaze across a restaurant table would cause Anne's cheeks to flush with a warm pink glow. Their conversations, once full of stories and dreams, now also held pauses, heavy, meaningful silences where words were unnecessary, where the air itself seemed to hum with unspoken understanding and burgeoning desire. The world they were building together was no longer just an external adventure. It was becoming a private universe of shared glances and whispered secrets. Charles's immense, luxurious apartment, once a sterile showcase of wealth and quiet isolation, began to transform under Anne's gentle influence. A vibrant bouquet from her shop now stood on the stark, modern kitchen island, its wild colors, a rebellion against the monochrome palette. A cozy, soft throw blanket, a gift from her, was draped over the back of his austere leather sofa. The space began to feel less like a museum and more like a home, imbued with her spirit. It was in this newly softened environment that their physical closeness naturally deepened. An evening spent reading on that same sofa would end with Anne's head resting in his lap, his fingers gently tracing patterns through her hair as she read passages of a book aloud. He would massage her shoulders after a long day on her feet at the shop, feeling the tension melt away under his touch, a simple act of care that felt more intimate than any business deal he had ever closed. The anticipation of their time together became a constant sweet ache. For Charles, the drive to her flower shop at the end of the day was the highlight of his schedule, the moment when the weight of his responsibilities would lift. For Anne, hearing his key in the lock of her small, cozy apartment above the shop would send a flutter of excitement through her chest. They learned each other's rhythms and preferences. How Charles liked his coffee in the morning the specific way, and would hum when she was contentedly working on a floral arrangement. This deep, knowing familiarity built a foundation of trust so strong that the step into full physical intimacy felt not like a leap, but a natural, inevitable progression. The night it happened began not with grand plans, but with a quiet, shared simplicity. Charles had cooked dinner for her in his apartment, a simple pasta dish that was slightly overseas but made with sincere effort. They ate by candlelight, the soft glow casting dancing shadows on the walls, and talked 4 hours, their conversation meandering from silly childhood fears to their deepest hopes for the future. There was no rush, no pressure. The air was thick with a comfortable, warm affection. As they cleared the plates, their hands touched over the sink, and instead of pulling away, Charles turned her gently to face him. He looked into her eyes, a silent question held in his gaze. An answer, and rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. But this kiss was different from the one in the park. It was not a promise of a beginning. It was a confirmation of everything that had been building between them. It was slower, deeper, filled with a heat that had been patiently banked for weeks. That first time was a tender, exploratory dance. It was filled with soft whispers and nervous laughter, with the fumbling of buttons and the rustle of discarded clothes. It was the feeling of cool, silken sheets against warm skin and the solid, reassuring weight of his body over hers. It was the sight of Anne's hair fanned out across his pillow, her eyes dark with desire and trust. For Charles, it was an act of reverence, a worship of the woman who'd brought light into his life. For Anne, it was a complete surrender, a giving of herself to the man who saw and cherished the real her. The world outside the city with its millions of lights ceased to exist. There was only the two of them in that room, in that bed, connected in the most ancient and profound way two people can be. And then, as the night deepened, wrapped in the quiet darkness, something shifted again. The initial tender exploration gave way to a more urgent, raw passion. The gentle caresses became more demanding. The whispers turned into breathless murmurs of need. The nervousness had melted away, replaced by a confident, hungry familiarity with each other's bodies. The first time had been about discovery. What followed was about claiming and being claimed, about losing themselves completely in the sensation of the other. The digital clock on the bedside table ticked silently past the hours, its numbers changing unnoticed as they came together again and then again. It was a night of rediscovery, each encounter a new verse in the same beautiful song. The seventh time, as the first faint hints of dawn began to lighten the sky beyond the windows, was slower, more profound than all the others. It was less about hunger and more about a deep, soul-deep connection, a final silent vow made with their bodies, a perfect exhausted union that left them breathless and utterly spent. Finally, wrapped tightly in each other's arms, their limbs entangled, their skin damp and smelling of each other, they fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The room was silent, save for the sound of their synchronized breathing, a testament to a night that had woven their lives together inextricably. The first light of dawn was a timid intruder in the bedroom, a pale greyish glow that slowly seeped around the edges of the heavy curtains. It was this faint illumination, not a sound, that pulled Charles from the deepest, most contented sleep of his life. Consciousness returned to him, not as a jarring shift, but as a gentle tide washing in, bringing with it the sensory memories of the night before. The first thing he became aware of was the weight and warmth of, and nestled against his side, her head pillowed on his chest, one arm draped possessively across his stomach. Her breathing was a soft, steady rhythm against his skin, a living lullaby, a profound, almost dizzying sense of peace settled over him. He had spent a lifetime acquiring things, building an empire of objects and numbers, but none of it compared to the simple, staggering value of this single moment, this feeling of a beloved, trusting person sleeping safely in his arms. He lay perfectly still, not wanting to disturb her, savoring the quiet intimacy. He could smell the faint floral scent of her hair, mingled with the unique fragrance of their shared skin. He let his gaze travel around the room, the details emerging from the gloom. The discarded clothing from their passionate night lay in soft piles on the floor, a silent testament to the abandon they had shared. A half-empty glass of water sat on the nightstand beside the small, garishly pink stuffed bear from the street fair, which had placed there with a smile days ago. His world, once so sterile and ordered, was now a beautiful, comfortable mess, and he loved it. He loved her. The thought was no longer a startling revelation, but a solid, undeniable fact, as real and present as the woman beside him. He gently tightened his arm around her, pressing a feather-like kiss to her forehead. She sighed in her sleep, a small, contented sound, and nestled closer. It was as he was contemplating the perfect brightness of it all, that his eyes, now adjusted to the dim light, drifted idly across the rumpled sheets. The pristine white of the bedding was a canvas upon which the story of their night was written in gentle creases and shadows.
And then he saw it.
A small, stark patch of colour that was out of place, a rusty, brownish red stain no larger than a coin marring the white fabric near wherein lay. His brain, so adept at analysing complex data and forecasting financial trends, seemed to short-circuit. For a single suspended second it refused to process the information. Then understanding crashed over him with the force of a physical blow. Blood! A cold dread, sharp and immediate, flooded his veins, instantly vaporizing the warm contentment of moments before. His heart, which had been beating a slow, relaxed rhythm, suddenly hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Blood on the sheets after the night they had shared. His mind, now fully and horribly awake, began to race down a dark and terrifying path. Had he heard her in the passion and intensity of their closeness, in his own eager enthusiasm?
Had he been Turo?
Had he caused her some injury, some tear or abrasion, that he, in his selfish pleasure, had been completely oblivious to the thought was a poison spreading through him, turning his stomach to ice? He remembered the sheer number of times they had made love, the raw, unrestrained nature of their passion. He had been lost in sensation, in the joy of her. What if, in that abandon, he had been careless? What if he had harmed the one person who meant more to him than anything else in the world? He froze, his body rigid. The arm that had been holding her so tenderly now felt like a lead weight. He was afraid to move, afraid to even breathe, as if the slightest motion might confirm his worst fears. His gaze was locked on the stain, the small spot of colour seeming to grow and pulse in his vision, a glaring symbol of his own potential failure as a lover, as a protector. 1,000 images flashed through his mind, and wincing in pain, but hiding it for his sake, and bleeding in him, being completely unaware, consumed only by his own desire. The guilt was acute and suffocating. The perfect, beautiful night was now cast in a sinister, frightening light. He felt a fool, a clumsy brute who had taken the most precious gift and tarnished it with his own lack of control. It was the tension in his body that finally woke her and stirred, her fingers flexing against his stomach. She murmured his name, her voice thick with sleep, and began to shift, to stretch. As she moved, the sheet pulled slightly, drawing her attention to the area he had been staring at with such horror. She saw the stain. She saw his ashen face, his wide, terrified eyes fixed upon it. For a brief moment, her own expression flickered with something, surprise perhaps, or a flash of embarrassment. But then she looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the sheer, unvarnished panic etched into every line of his face. She saw the man she loved frozen not by disgust, but by fear. Slowly, gently, she reached out and placed her hand over his, which was clenched into a tight fist on the sheet. Her touch was warm, a stark contrast to the cold dread gripping him. "Charles," she said, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the frantic noise of his thoughts. "Look at me." He dragged his gaze from the sheet to her face. Her eyes were calm, filled with understanding and a deep, patient affection. "Charles," she repeated, her fingers lacing with his.
"It's okay.
"I'm not hurt." She took a slow breath, her expression open and honest. It's just something that can happen to a woman's body. It's natural. It doesn't mean anything is wrong."
"It doesn't mean you hurt me." She squeezed his hand, her gaze holding his, willing him to believe her. "I wasn't going to say anything because, well, it's a little embarrassing, but I was never in any pain."
"Not once. Last night was perfect." The words washed over him, not all at once, but in gradual healing waves. The icy knot in his chest began to loosen. The terrifying images in his mind started to dissolve. He searched her eyes and saw only truth. There was no hint of pain, no shadow of resentment, only a gentle reassurance. The relief that flooded through him was so powerful, it left him weak. It was a physical sensation, a warmth returning to his limbs, the ability to breathe fully returning to his lungs. The fear and guilt receded, and in their place bloomed a new, even deeper layer of emotion. It wasn't just relief. It was a profound, humbling sense of gratitude for her honesty, for her vulnerability. In this moment, she was trusting him not just with her body, but with the normal, sometimes messy realities of it. He let out a long, shuddering breath, his shoulders slumping as the tension finally left them. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture of reverence and thanks. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against him, burying his face in her hair.
"I was so scared," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. I thought I'd hurt you." "Now," she murmured into his neck, holding him just as tightly.
"But you didn't. You couldn't." In that quiet, sunlit room, surrounded by the evidence of their passion at night, a different, more profound intimacy was forged. It was an intimacy built not just on pleasure, but on vulnerability, on fear faced and soothed, on truth spoken and accepted. The incident of the morning after did not become a scar upon their relationship, but rather a sacred stitch that bound them even closer, a moment of shared vulnerability that solidified their trust in one another. In the weeks and months that followed, Charles and Anne's love story did not fade into a comfortable routine, but instead deepened into a rich and vibrant partnership. Charles's sprawling apartment was no longer just a place softened by Anne's presence. It became a true home filled with the scent of her flowers, the sound of her laughter, and the tangible warmth of a shared life. The Pinkstead bear had a permanent place on a bookshelf, a cherished relic from the day Charles began to truly live. He found himself looking forward not to high-stakes business meetings, but to the simple act of helping and close her shop, of sweeping the tiled floor while she balanced the day's earnings, of sharing a simple meal and talking about their days. He had discovered a universe of meaning within the four walls of Thepital Place, a universe far more valuable than any he had built himself, and in turn continued to flourish, her confidence and joy radiating outwards. She never saw Charles's wealth as something to exploit, but as a tool they could use together. With his steadfast support and belief in her, she launched the community workshops she had always dreamed of, teaching children and seniors alike how to arrange flowers, filling the neighborhood with beauty and connection. Charles would often stand in the back of the shop during these sessions, watching her with a heart so full he thought it might burst. He was not just her lover, he was her proudest champion. They were a team, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. He taught her about business spreadsheets, and she taught him about the language of different blossoms. Their love was a living, breathing thing, nurtured daily by mutual respect, unwavering support, and a passion that continued to burn as brightly as it had on that first, unforgettable night. The idea of marriage had lived in Charles's heart for a long time, not as a vague notion, but as a quiet, certain truth. He did not, however, plan an elaborate public spectacle. He knew that their love had been built in moments of beautiful simplicity, and it was in such a moment that he wanted to pledge his forever. One evening, as the sun cast long golden shadows through the windows of her flower shop, he found her there and was at her work table, surrounded by a riot of colors and textures. Velvety red roses, delicate sprigs of baby's breath, vibrant purple irises. Her hands were busy, but her face was serene, completely in her element. The air was thick with the earthy, sweet perfume of blooms and damp soil, the very same scent that had clung to her on the night they met. He walked over to her, his heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. He didn't have a ring box hidden in his hand. Instead, he reached for one of the deep red roses from her bucket, its petals perfect and unfurling. He snapped the thorny stem short and looked up, a curious smile playing on her lips. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice warm with amusement. Charles got down on one knee right there on the tiled floor, amidst the stray petals and green leaf clippings. He held up the single beautiful rose. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of stunned realization, her hands stilling their work.
"Anne," he began, his voice clear and filled with emotion.
"You appeared in my life on a rainy night like a miracle with an umbrella and a cup of tea. You showed me that the best things in life aren't things you can buy. They are picnics in the park and messy hot dogs and the sound of your laughter. You taught me that love isn't about grand gestures and fancy restaurants, but about holding someone's hand through the messy, real, and beautiful parts of life." He took a deep breath, his eyes locked with hers, seeing the tears beginning to well in them. "You are my home and you are my entire world. Will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife?" A single happy tear escaped and traced a path down Anne's cheek as she looked at the man she loved, kneeling among the flowers, offering her a single rose in his whole heart. There were no doubts, no hesitations, only a soaring, perfect joy. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion, then louder with a brilliant, tearful smile. "Yes, Charles."
1,000 times yes.
She came around the table and into his arms as he stood, and he held her, spinning her once in a circle amidst the flowers, their laughter mingling with happy tears. The wedding they planned was a reflection of them, held in a sun-drenched garden filled with every flower from her shop. They exchanged vows, not in a stuffy church, but under a canopy of woven blossoms, surrounded by the friends they had made in their neighborhood and the new family they had created together. It was not a merger of fortunes, but a union of souls. Their life together was a long and happy one, a tapestry woven with threads of passion, understanding, and unwavering companionship. They faced challenges, as all couples do, but they faced them as a team, their bond only growing stronger with each passing year. The memory of the night of 7 times became a cherished, private part of their history, a testament to the fiery beginning of their physical love. The memory of the frightened morning after became a touchstone of the profound trust and honesty that formed its unshakable foundation. Charles had spent his first half of life building a fortune, but he spent his second and far more meaningful half building a life, a simple, beautiful forever with the woman who had taught him that love was the greatest treasure of all. We hope you were swept away by the journey of Charles and Anne. If you believed in their love story from that first rainy night to their final happy beginning, then be sure to follow along for more timeless romances. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story of heart, hope, and finding forever where you least expect it. Your next favorite love story is waiting.